Hey, Kevin.
Hey, bud.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
We're
We're
good.
back again, yeah.
So a little bit long between podcasts this time. Busy week, travel stuff.
Yeah,
You,
travel.
me, how's business?
We're busy.
You're busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another reason.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I won't complain about it because eventually we'll be slow.
You got to pay the bill.
So
You know it will happen, right?
yes.
It cycles.
Anyway, but that's
Yep.
the way mortgages work.
Yeah. It is.
Refinances.
Well, I like your shirt today, right?
Well, yeah.
It's good to
Start,
to advertise one of the sponsors.
right.
One of the podcast sponsors.
Right.
I guess I am too, right? I mean, our
You matter, integrity.
ministry,
Yeah.
Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah, so we got that. So that's all good. So
Anyway,
Yeah.
welcome to the 12-2 podcast.
yeah, welcome to you too.
Yeah,
I'm glad we're back. There's just so much. We could do this thing literally every day, and
Some people
have
do.
something new. They do. Yeah, but they have nothing else to do. They don't have real jobs
They
like you
don't-
and I, right?
Exactly. I mean, I know there's a lot going on. We've been what are we at? Week 3 of the
Yeah,
shutdown.
the shutdown.
Yeah, which is I didn't think it would go this long, but
I didn't either.
What do I know?
But one of the things I do think, and I know we're going to get to something that
Some
you've
other
kinda,
stuff.
but I do want to say this.
Yeah.
I do think that it's kind of exposing to a lot of people, the shutdown, the reality of what Obamacare really was from the beginning. Because the subsidies that were like, oh wow, I get like such and such off of my health insurance premium, but that's coming out of your pocket anyway,
Right.
through the form of taxes. And so now one of the things I think that is happening as longer this is exposed is exposing the reality of Obamacare, that when you subsidize something, and this is simple economic theory, it's not even theory, it's practice, right? It goes beyond theory. When you subsidize something, the price is always going to go up.
Yep.
And so the subsidies over the years have been, masquerading, I guess, or covering up the reality of the costs of healthcare and the cost of insurance as it goes up, and people haven't seen it. And now that the subsidies are set to sunset right?
Yeah.
In 2025, now the Democrats are really up against it because Obamacare is their bag. It's their deal.
Well, it was interesting because they upped the subsidies during the whole COVID thing, and then they dumped a bunch of money into the system, which of course caused inflation.
Mm-hmm.
So now you got this double thing of the inflation hitting and the subsidies going away.
Yes.
And if they were so great and necessary, why did they have them sunset?
Absolutely. So good point. I wonder if it had anything to do with the sunsetting, so to speak, of Trump's tax cuts. I don't see a corollary there, but
No.
it could have. But it is somewhat coincidental, it seems, that those two things happened, and then the big beautiful bill extended those tax cuts.
Right. I guess they made them permanent or whatever the case is. So
yeah, which is good for us, right?
Yeah, good for
the small business. Yeah.
the average worker.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. We're pretty average. Yeah, we're pretty average.
Very average. But I just don't know how it's going to end. I mean, it's very interesting because everything would have been maintained, and they would have been able to negotiate this, and instead they decided to go with the shutdown. And with the shutdown, it's all about perception and which side is perceived to be the one that causing it, and a lot of it has to do with messaging. So we'll see how the messaging continues.
How about the messaging we heard last night where one of the Congress ladies said something about, I know this is hurting the American people, but this is a point of leverage for us.
Right,
We're talking about the Democratic side.
Wasn't it the Democratic whip, the second in command? Yeah.
And that's... And I also like what the senator from Pennsylvania, Fetterman, said.
Yeah.
He said, I cannot vote for something because I got 2 million people in my state that rely on SNAP for food benefits. And I can't, healthcare, how about eating, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, you're right. Let's see how it ends. I'm sure we can talk about it and debrief it a little bit whenever that time comes.
Yeah, I just, like I said, I don't know how it's going to end, and it'll be whoever's messaging continues to get out there, and then the way the polls roll. Yeah. And I know that with the No Kings rallies and stuff like that kind of gave a little bit of, I want to say, backbone to the Democrats. But ultimately, they are being controlled by the extreme left of their party, the most progressive, the most socialist, Antifa, if you want to say.
Yeah, let's say it. That
side
branch
of their party.
Sure.
And so ultimately, we know that Chuck Schumer is afraid he's going to be primaried in, 28? 28, I guess it was.
Yeah.
I think it's 28.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to show that he's a good progressive Democrat. And so, when these extremes start controlling the party, ultimately it's the average person that ends up suffering.
Right, exactly.
And that's what we're seeing happen. So
yeah, I just don't think America's ready for that type of extremism, and
at least I hope not.
No, I hope not. You're right, and I can't imagine. Of course, who knows? We get complacent. Those who feel that we're in a place of, right, center right, policy now. We get complacent. That's my fear. Right.
Right.
And things are surprising, but we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, we will.
You mentioned Antifa as being kind of that wing of the party. We watch what's going on in Portland.
Right, and Chicago.
And
I guess that was a good example.
LA and
New York.
Yeah, exactly.
And
we go back to Ephesus when Paul was, spreading the gospel, and the merchants who were the silversmiths, who we're going to talk about this Sunday, as a matter of fact, who were peddling all the idols of Artemis, and they got upset, and the silversmiths got together and started a riot there in town, and it says the Bible, Luke was a funny writer. I mean, he did have a sense of humor. When you look at his writings in the book of Luke, in Acts, he kind of had this little wry sense of humor. And he said so many of the people were there shouting and screaming, and they had no idea why they were there.
That is so typical of so many things, though, because here, let's be honest. Paul in Ephesus, he comes and he presents, and then then they get upset because they're afraid that their moneymaker will go away.
Yeah, absolutely.
If people start worshiping Jesus doesn't require. In fact, he forbids a representation of him. He forbids idol worship, and they get fearful of that. But they can't make a case for why you should reject Jesus and continue worshiping their idols. So what do? Yeah. They riot.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting, because so many times that's basically what Antifa is, or the BLM, or any of these riots. They have a failure to be able to get their argument across to where the majority of the American people, or the average person, accepts their argument. So what do? They riot, they cause mayhem, they put fear in people, hoping to change people's minds. It was the same thing that we've seen it time and time again.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
Lenin overthrew a whole country by getting students to say, hey, we all need communism, and we need to get rid of the czar.
Right. Yeah, and he murdered how many millions in the process in order to make that happen.
Stalin, I don't know, 20 million.
Between the two of them.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Of course, that's what they were. Totally insane. But you're right, we're seeing this stuff today. But a little bit on the origin of Antifa. Now, the word comes from anti-fascist,
Fascism.
Technically, right?
And
and so, but and fascism today is another word like love, right? Well, it's not like love, but we think of the word love. I love my wife. I love hot dogs. Right. We've taken the word love and we've just kind of diluted it, right? And we've actually done the same thing with fascism, right?
We have. what kind of got me going down this rabbit hole a little bit of what is Antifa, what's going on with that is this whole thing of either they've created this false dichotomy. If you don't support what they believe, then you're a fascist. And then that you've seen the memes come across your social media where they show the guys storming the beach of Normandy and they point out that our GIs were anti-fascist because they were getting ready to fight the fascists.
Yeah,
or you see,
right.
I saw one where it had Winston Churchill and FDR, and it said these guys were anti-fascist, because they were going to fight Nazism. But most people have no idea what Antifa actually is and what it stands for, or even its origins. I mean, its origins started basically in Italy.
And it was back in around the early 20th century, right?
And I think in the 32 is when the movement started in Italy, and it was the communist. Antifa was begun by communists. It's a communist movement, but they were going to fight the fascists, which are National Socialists. So they all have the same goal in mind, and that is the control of the means of production. It just depends on, a communist would have, we're going to control the means of production for the whole world.
And really, Kevin, let me just ask you this question.
Okay.
Because I think it's important for our viewers. First of all, viewers. Well, we got viewers, right?
Viewers and
whatever
listeners.
they are,
Yeah,
right? National Socialists, there's a term we have for that, right?
Nazi.
Right? That's Nazi.
Right.
That's what that is.
Right.
So the point of the matter is these folks were communists who wanted to use the national platform, right? Nationalizing as you just said, the means of production.
Right.
That's the marriage of nationalism and communism.
Socialism, yeah.
Socialism, communism, as it was originally I guess codified, right?
Right.
And so we need to understand that there is a method here that the marriage of these two concepts really enables when we think about it. So just because the mechanics of this stuff is really important, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, and so, I mean, they were fighting against, because Mussolini had come to power and he was a fascist. He was the one who actually coined the term fascism, and it was this nationalistic idea that, that Italy was supreme. But on top of that, it was that they needed a strong leader, which was, in this case, Mussolini, and that the government needed to control the means of production. In other words, kind of pick the winners and losers, kind of get in bed with the corporations and the means of production in order to promote the nation state.
Right.
And of course, Hitler picks that up, and you end up with Nazism in Germany, and they're probably the height of what fascism really was.
Because he took it to the point of the Aryan race, which was basically a fictitious concept.
Right.
But he certainly, there were enough blonde-haired, blue-eyed people in Germany where he could make the case, right?
Well, but going even further back, you had Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, hey, we don't need God anymore. But basically, in place of God, what we need is a Superman. So he kind of took that concept and said, hey, not only do we need a Superman, we need a super race. And that the German people are the super race and everybody else is inferior to that race. So then he, merges this idea of eugenics, which he picked up actually from the progressive left in the United States.
That's
Margaret
right.
Sanger,
That's right.
Woodrow Wilson,
That's right.
those people.
Woodrow Wilson, who was a Republican, by the way.
No, he was a Democrat.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he was
Coolidge.
a Democrat.
I'm thinking Coolidge.
You're thinking of Coolidge.
You're
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Get those
Woodrow
guys
Wilson
mixed
was
up,
a Democrat that actually came out of the academia because he figured, he made the argument that smart people should be the ones in charge, the people that know the most. And so, but all of that comes out. He takes that idea of eugenics and incorporates it into the National Socialist.
And we take it even further back, Kevin. Tell me if I'm wrong here.
Right.
I may be. We can take this all the way back to Darwinian
evolution. Yep.
Survival of the fittest,
survival
et cetera.
of the fittest.
And this progression or regression in our minds, right? But people see it, the proponents see it as a progression, right?
Exactly.
This is how the justification of that Darwinian evolution kind of continues. Well, they claim that it continues, but that's
right. If we can just have strong people, for lack of a better word, breed, then we'll create strong human beings.
So everything along the way, Kevin, really, everything along the way has really, when we get down to it, that we're talking about here, all these things, the philosophy, the theories behind them, have basically been disproven. The economic system doesn't even work. It collapses everywhere. It leads to death. You have to kill people in order to put it in place. Everything about it, at every step along the way, has proven to be disastrous, false, all those things. And yet, here we are in the greatest country that's ever, existed, with a capitalistic underpinning.
Correct.
And folks are...
And young people have said that I want that.
Yes.
I think socialism is beneficial. Now, I will say that they didn't get there on their own. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is when you say that it's been proven, it hasn't worked, and it's all because it's a rejection of biblical truth.
That's right.
There is no creator.
That's right.
Darwin said there is no creator, and I'll give you a way that I can prove that there's no creator because we evolved. Mm. Well, man takes that and goes, well, if we evolved to man, how can we evolve to being greater than man?
Greater than man. We haven't done that yet.
To being God himself.
These are all ideas about how to do it.
Right. And then, Friedrich Nietzsche comes out and says, hey, God is dead. We don't need this concept of God anymore. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Karl Marx comes out and says, we don't, religion is the opiate for the masses. We don't need capitalism anymore. We don't need personal property anymore. We don't need people being paid for meritocracy anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We do away with all that, and we just make everybody equal.
Because all those things are biblical principles. They're characteristic of God's economy.
Right.
Of how we live, how we fund ministry, right? How we take care of the poor, how we self-actualize as followers of Christ.
It's right there in the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's pretty basic.
You start out with God. Who we're going to worship is going to be God. Mm-hmm. You start out with personal property because you're not supposed to steal other people's stuff. You start out with sanctity of life. Don't go murdering people. You start out with the family. Honor your father and your mother.
Mm-hmm. Faithfulness in marriage. Faithfulness.
Right. Don't be an adulterer.
Yeah.
And don't covet other people's stuff, and all those things have to be violated in order for you to get to the point of communism. Because
that's a great point you make, because I want to make sure that you make that that we hear that, right? Because everything that we're talking about really runs antithetical to every one of those 10 commandments.
Oh yeah,
every one, with no exceptions, right? And it doesn't just ignore them; it totally tries to repudiate them, but they can't.
Right. I mean, if you even think about stuff like communism in Russia, it got to the point where, the average person who was living in a village, who had worked hard all his life and who had had built a farm that basically fed his family and kept him clothed and kept a roof over his children's head. Eventually, after they had gotten rid of the aristocracy, the aristocracy, they gotten rid of the czars and all the guys in power. Mm-hmm. They then turned their eyes to, you have too much because you have 2 cows. Mm-hmm. And because you have 2 cows and I have no cows, I'm going to kill you and take both your cows.
Right.
And that covetousness part of it, it just continues to breed and breed and breed, and there is no end to it because you're always desiring, well, once I get your stuff, well, now I desire somebody else's stuff and somebody else's stuff. And we see this is one of the things that Antifa stands for.
Right.
They look around and go, well, I went to college and got a degree in whatever, LGBT literature, and I can't get a job. Well, you went to school and worked really hard and became a doctor. That's unfair.
Right.
So I should take your stuff, or you didn't go to school and you worked really hard and built a shop. Well, I should take all the stuff out of your shop because you got insurance anyway. So I'll bash your windows, steal your TV, steal all the TVs, and you can just file it with insurance. And everybody, I have a TV now, and you can get another one. Type deal.
So, all right, that's exactly what's happening.
Exactly.
And what we're seeing then is, so we see this lawlessness, right?
Correct.
And we know that this is going on in the cities where there's looting, there's people destroying cars. Even if they don't take the car, they'll destroy it because it gives them a satisfaction of taking away. And so, you being deprived of something that is an asset for you, to me, if I'm the proponent of Antifa, that gives me a lot of satisfaction too. I may not get a car out of it, but I
just took yours.
Yeah, just took yours, right? It's not.
So now we're equal.
Maybe I'm not driving it, but it's destroyed. I set it on fire or something like that. So the point really is that we've got to go deeper than an understanding that these people who are doing this stuff in the cities are lawless and they're breaking laws. You made the point that there is a philosophical underpinning that nullifies in their minds the laws that we have. And this is another. We look at illegal immigration, the crossing of the border, et cetera. All the situations, most of the situations where we see the government bodies either ignoring, not enforcing laws, et cetera. It's likely because they have truly prescribed to this sinister, this diabolical philosophical system that we're talking about, this marriage of communism and socialism, and so therefore, because our laws have been established around the foundation of capitalism,
right?
That doesn't apply to them because forcibly they're trying to impose a different philosophy on America.
And that's one of the things that just kind of bothered me is because, if you say you're America first, in other words, you support this idea that the government should be for the people and by the people. In other words, that we own the government because we pay for it.
Right.
Therefore they should be, passing laws and for our benefit. They should be not spending money
needlessly.
That doesn't benefit the American citizenship. So if you say that, hey, I believe America should be first, well, there's a couple things that happen once you say that. First of all, well, if I believe in America first as a national, someone who is, we used to call it patriotism. It's been kind of, they've shifted that term to nationalist.
Right.
That way they can blame us of being a fascist because
they can take us back to Mussolini and Hitler and all the others.
That's how they get there. They've taken patriotism, pride in one's country, change that to a nationalist, and then they just kind of move just one more degree and say, oh, you're a fascist because you're proud of America and you think that America is for Americans and that we should enforce a border because if you have no border, you have no country.
Right.
And then on top of that, well, you do away with this whole idea of globalism and you say that, no, we as a country should be producing things because a country that doesn't produce anything, how can they call themselves a country? What benefit do they have for the citizens of that country?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you see that movement, all of a sudden they now can paint you if you're a MAGA person, they can paint you as a fascist and then call you a Nazi because Nazis are bad. And who's going to be upset if somebody punches a, quote, Nazi in the face?
Yeah, and with Trump being as active as he is, right? We've not seen this since, the Roosevelt guys, right? Both Teddy, Franklin, both of them were moving at this kind of speed as well for the most part. But that's not in really our modern history,
No.
so that's very different from what we're seeing. And with Trump moving as quickly as he is, it's easy for them to take that nationalism that you're talking about, that label, right, and applying it to him because he's doing all this in the name of nationalism,
right?
But, except they want to say, well, it's all about him, right? The whole king thing, and all that mess.
Right.
But,
and actually, he's doing it for the benefit not of himself personally,
right? Sure,
but the benefit. What he believes is the benefit of the average American worker,
and he's acting within his constitutional boundaries for the most part. Now he'll get caught. I mean, there's so much scrutiny on him if the courts legitimately need to put the brakes on something. It will happen.
Well, that was the reason why it was set up the way it was, with the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. So they were each checks on each other. And if he were to go further than what the Constitution would allow, then of course you would hope that if the court system is doing what they're supposed to do, and that is interpret the Constitution as it was written, then that they would go, hey, you're overstepping your bounds. Or if he exceeds what the legislation has given him the power to do, they would say, whoa, But part of the problem is so many of our representatives have failed in their objective to pass laws, to fix things. So, of course, it gets shifted over to the executive branch.
And that's where we get the executive orders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, so one of the things very important we got to understand is, we think about this, Kevin, and we think about there have been orders where the courts have told Trump to cease and desist, right? In most cases, other appellate courts have validated what he wanted to do.
Right.
But think about things like the student loan decision when Biden was president, and the court clearly struck down the work he was trying to do to basically eliminate student loan debt. And then he said, well, we're just going to combat it in a different way. And what he wound up doing was doing the very same thing again, totally ignoring the ruling of the court. Nobody talked about that as being fascism in the day, right?
Of course not, because he was on their side promoting their ideals and their idea that they have, which is a progressive idea of moving the country more towards a
communistic,
an authoritarian type system where those on the progressive left get to dictate the rules. Just think of, we just came out of this whole time of this period of wokeism where,
are we out?
Well,
we're getting out. We're getting out.
I mean, where somebody would use a word and all of a sudden, oh, they're a terrible person. They need to be canceled, and there was no way of them getting back. I mean, they destroyed people over an opinion of like, hey, guys shouldn't be allowed in a girl's dressing room. And all of a sudden, well, you're a terrible transphobic bigot. We need to destroy you. And so you see that control that they're wanting.
Just power.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just like resorting to violence. That's an example of verbal violence, verbal violence, that character assassination that occurs because of that. But let's also make sure that we understand that. We were talking about this whole idea, we're just kind of going back to the student loan thing.
Right.
That is that whole deal of the elimination of that is a totally socialistic move that comes right out of the playbook of the socialism and communism, because it's a redistribution of wealth, right?
Right.
Between and education is another example where subsidies, i.e., student aid,
loans,
Pell Grant, all that stuff has driven the cost of tuition up. And a great example, go back to Obamacare. We started out with that. Totally redistribution of wealth. Totally socialistic. We're thinking, oh, great, I get this subsidy, I get this low premium. Understand you're benefiting, right, from a provision of socialism and communism. And the tenets of socialism, communism cannot coexist with the economic principles of capitalism. No. There's going to be a train wreck. And we are now, Kevin, I think this is where we're seeing the train wreck, kind of circling back to what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, the train
shutdown.
wreck, but I believe that it was set up to be a train wreck.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Well, I mean, take the student loan example. And, they gave out student loan money like crazy and gave it to people getting degrees that they knew they would never be able to pay back, be able to pay back that student loan. Yet they took advantage
because they couldn't get jobs to make money to pay them back.
Right. But they took advantage of 18, 19-year-olds and then strapped them with this thing that they can never get rid of. They might as well give it a name because it's a pet that's going to be with them for the rest of their life. And so, but I think they knew that because then it would breed discontent, and somebody would be saying, well, you've got to fix this at some point, and then how do you fix it? And they did the same thing with Obamacare. They knew at some point that the cost would become so prohibitive that the people would, of course, cry out, I can't afford my health insurance anymore. You guys got to fix this. But they created it so that it would create that, so that they could come back and say, well, this didn't work, so we're just going to wipe it out and go to a national health care like socialist countries have. So
that's true.
I think it's on purpose.
We're out of time. I hate it. This is fun. Oh my gosh. So we'll have to continue this one for sure next week.
Like us, do all the stuff.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.